Hello there, and thank you for joining us from wherever you are. We are live from our studios here in Kokomlimle on digital address GA0992539. Our top stories this hour. Another medical staff dies of coronavirus, this time at the Konfanochi Teaching Hospital. We're live at the hospital to get some more details. And also another fight breaks out at a registration center. We'll take you live to the Krowo constituency for the live updates as tensions brew there. Also coming up, Minority challenges Communication Ministry's directive to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation to close down 3 of its digital television channels as they demand the withdrawal of the directive. We're live in Parliament and with independent perspectives. Those are top stories this hour. My name is Gifty Andopia. We're live on your digital television for free on DSTV 421, GoTV 144. Remember, we're streaming live on YouTube as well. And you can join us on our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Do stay with me. My name is Gifty Andopia. This is The Pulse. You're welcome to the details of the show and more. We'll begin with the update on the ongoing voter registration exercise. This afternoon, a fight broke out at one of the centers at the Krowo constituency. Maxwell Agbaba is joining me live from the area shortly, but first, take a look at this.
What is the fight over? So there you have it. No masks, no distancing, there's crowding, there's screaming at each other, touching each other, everything you shouldn't be doing in coronavirus. But what really happened? Maxwell Agbaba is my colleague who is on the ground for us. He joins me live right now. Hello, Maxwell. Let's start with what happened. Yeah, hello, Gifty. Well, Gifty, what happened is actually the mystery. We are still trying to, unravel what caused the, that free-for-all fight that we witnessed here in the Krowo constituency. Let me just say that generally, going around, some of the registration centers, you could see that all was going on smoothly until we arrived at that particular registration center. The municipal chief executive for this area, we've been speaking to him. He was on the ground when the incident happened. We tried to understand, what really was the case. He downplayed it and he said it was just a disagreement between brothers. He told us that, it's the registration process has been smooth, in the municipality. But what we saw is just one of the things that usually you find some of the youthful and exuberant, young people, in the municipality. Once in a while, you find them engaging in these acts of disagreement. So he couldn't really give us the cause of that, of that scuffle that we saw on TV. We also tried to speak to the Nungua police commander, who was called in because when the incident happened, there were just about 3 police officers on the ground. Now, what happened was that because they were not armed, they couldn't do anything about the situation. One of them I observed was just, filming the incident on his phone without really doing anything to help the situation. That scuffle, that disagreement resulted in the halting of the registration process for some time. So I observed some of the registration officers moving into a nearby room with their machines because they really did not know what was going to happen in the heat of that disagreement. So they had to suspend the registration for some time. They had to go into a nearby room, for safety. One of the registration officers also rushed to the police station to go and report the matter. But some minutes after that incident, we saw reinforcements. We saw more police officers coming to the ground. We saw armed police officers coming to the ground to ensure that a serene atmosphere, was, created. We spoke to the commander himself. The commander who we spoke to also tried to, somehow, some way, downplay the incidents that we saw on the ground there. So, Gifty, really, it is difficult, telling what exactly, caused the disagreement and then the confusion that we witnessed here in the Krobo constituency. Aside from, what we witnessed in the beginning, which was a smooth start of the process, and then later it's, it degenerated into something else, Gifty.
And I appreciate you having to speak, give us that chronology of events through your mask. I can appreciate the difficulties that you're having there. But this is a registration process that you say was halted because of this particular incident. I'd like to know whether it resumed and is it still ongoing?
Yeah, so they've resumed the, what do you call it? They've resumed the registration process. So as it stands now, the registration process is still, is currently ongoing. But registration was suspended for about 10 to 15 minutes, because the police had to calm nerves. They had to send the men who were causing, that scuffle there. They had to send all of them out in order for the registration itself to, continue. But for that, they wouldn't have been able to continue. So when the reinforcements came in, and then the police officers, many of them came onto the ground, then yeah, it got suspended for some time, and then it had to continue. Sorry, Gifty, my marks
I can totally understand. I can totally understand, and I really appreciate the extra effort you're having to put in for us to get this. But these gentlemen who started the fight, I heard one of them say that this is not the registration list. This is not the registration list. He said that about 3 times. I'm assuming, if we have not yet established what actually started the fight, I'm assuming that it has to do with a particular list. Did you by any chance get the opportunity to speak with them? And if not, are they still around? Perhaps we can still track them down.
Well, the registration officers themselves would not speak to us. They wouldn't, give us any information. We tried getting some information from them, but they wouldn't really give us any information. What also happened was that we tried connecting to some of the other people who were on the ground to get clarity on the matter, the party agents and the other people who had come, to witness the issue and also try to resolve, the matter. But it was really difficult getting some response from them. It looked the case that themselves really did not even know, what the situation was. They really did not know what caused the confusion. But even before we got access to the compound where the registration was taking place, we realized that quite a number of people were masked up outside the registration center. A lot of them were trying to get access to the registration center itself, but the police officers who were there, who were not armed, about 2 of them tried preventing them from getting access. So it was just between, that time that the whole situation escalated. Quite a number of them got access to the compound, and then it degenerated into a fight there at that particular registration center, Gifty.
Well, Maxwell, we'll have to, I'm sure that we'll have to give it a bit of time so we can understand exactly what happened there, how was it resolved, and going forward, will it even return? But the problem here also, Maxwell, before you go, is that none of them seem bothered about coronavirus at all. It was just fighting, screaming at each other, the aerosols that's been, spread all over the place like that, people touching each other, shoving each other. It looks just disastrous.
Yeah, exactly, Gifty. And that was the main concern for many of the people, who came there today, who were also present at that particular registration center. So aside from the violence that erupted, there were a lot of concerns about, coronavirus, because at that point when they were fighting, I don't remember seeing any of the people involved in that particular, fights wearing masks. No, they were not. And they were screaming at each other. They were, so close to, each other when they were fighting. Of course, in that heat of that disagreement, they would definitely forget about their social distancing, protocol. They would definitely also forget about their mask. And that was the concern one of the registration officers also, raised. She talked about, the fact that aside from the violence, aside from the fact that they had to suspend the registration exercise, these people have thrown, they threw caution, to the wind when they engaged in that particular fight, and also, risked the life of others who had come. Some people actually, had to run into safety. So some people who were legitimately in the queue and getting ready to register, they had to move away from the queue because of that fight that, broke out there.
Maxwell, thank you, and I'll just spare you all of the problems you're getting on location, bringing us those details. Maxwell, thank you so much. Maxwell Agbabade coming to us live from the Korowa constituency. Obviously, the mask giving him a bit of a disruption there with his report, but a very necessary evil, if you like. But what's happening in Korowa constituency is that the registration got halted for a while. The registration officers went to the police station to report a scuffle that ensued there. The registration then begins again. Maxwell tells us that as we speak, it is still ongoing. But obviously, you see the number of police officers there. Certainly, they will be overwhelmed in such a situation. No masks, no social or physical distancing, crowding, screaming at each other, shoving at each other. Those are the pictures from the Korowa constituency. Away from that, the National Peace Council has asked the opposition NDC and the governing NPP to distance themselves from the pockets of violence associated with the ongoing mass registration exercise. The Peace Council, which expressed worry over the recent incidents, linked the violent protest at Edrasetre, Dumasi, Kaswa, Esutifi South and Tano South constituencies to acts of vigilantism. Also, presiding bishop of the Methodist Church and the chairman of the Christian Council, Most Reverend Paul Kwabna Boafo, has also condemned the act.
I will not support it. I will condemn it totally outright, because it is not the best for our nation. This is only a registration exercise that can enfranchise us to vote and to exercise our political rights. So to go in there with all these clashes, I don't think it's in the right direction at all. And I would condemn it right away.
What must the police do? We often find that there's mistrust, especially between the opposition political party and the police. What must they do now?
I think that the police, they have the law. They know the law. So anybody who infringes on it must be arrested. If the person is found guilty, the person must be arrested. In fact, you see, principles are principles. We should not condone and connive principles. If the person is on the wrong side of the law, he or she must be arrested. For me, That is what I will call for. The police must be up and doing.
Presiding Bishop of the Methodist Church Ghana, Dr. Paul Boafo there, speaking to Daniel Darcy. Now, one of the registration centres identified as a hotspot in Yasawasi constituency is recording an increasing number of applicants whose eligibility is being challenged. 17 challenge forms have been completed at Bola Bola since the third phase of the exercise, which began on Sunday. It is believed that police and military presence has compelled party agents to resort to the challenge option instead of violence, the Masenso Mensa reports.
Bola Bola is sited along Aswansi's boundaries with Subin and Oforikrom constituencies. Both NPP and NDC have alleged non-residents are being barred by each of them into the area to register at such centres sited on the peripheral of the Aswansi constituency. Unlike in previous instances where fighting easily breaks out in such places, agents are using official channels to seek redress to their grievances. David Ando is the registration officer at Bola Bola.
There hasn't been any problem here. There hasn't been any problem. But it's just that there have been some challenges of people that they think they are not residents of this particular area. That is all that we have today. There hasn't been any.
How many challenge forms have they picked?
The challenge form, I think about 11 of them. There are 11 of them.
Okay.
So they will be meeting.
What are the reasons?
The challengers claim they are not residents of the area. So they have to go to the Akoremanpon's King's Palace and then defend themselves, give rules as to whether they are residents of the area or not. So it's up to them to visit the place and then.
What about the social distancing? Are you finding difficult to
it's been a challenge. We arrange and then disorganize it. We arrange and disorganize it. So it hasn't been as we expected. But then all the same, we are managing with it.
So if the challenge forms continues, what is the indication?
Oh, they have the right to challenge. It's also up to the challenger and the challenge to go and then prove himself right. That is all.
So yesterday, how many challenge forms?
Yesterday we filled 4.
4?
Yes, and today we have 11.
And the first day?
The first day, I think 3.
So it's increasing?
Yes, it's increasing day by day.
As Akoremanpon Municipal Chief Executive Ali Dusedu explains, the presence of security personnel is to prevent chaos.
Akoremanpon municipality is a densely populated municipality. Municipality of about 500,000 population. It tells you that you have a huge task in maintaining peace and also making sure that all activities are done without any sort of negativity. And where we are currently, we call this place Bola Bola. Bola Bola, we share boundary. The boundary line is just here. For this, as Akoremanpon. Just after this rail line is Ufuriku. Now you get to this side also. Just after that, the drain. There's also Subi constituency and for that matter KMU. So this is more or less like a border line between 3 metropolitan municipal assemblies, as Akoremanpon, Ufurikum, KMU. So you can see that you should expect the unexpected. On the basis of that, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we beef up security just to curtail any eventuality. We don't know what someone might be planning to do, so that in case of any other thing, when it comes to undesirable events, they will be there to curtail them and to make sure that we get free, fair, and peaceful registration.
Nana Asenso Mensa reporting.
Nana Asenso Mensa there reporting for JoyNews. Obviously, we're taking a very quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. The Peace Council is in the Banda district on a fact-finding mission after the clashes involving the NPP and the NDC over the ongoing voter registration exercise. A 28-year-old Silas Wuluchame died on Tuesday morning after he was stabbed in the back to death at Kabrono near the Banda in that region. The fresh graduate from Akimoda Teacher Training College was allegedly accosted by some NPP activists at a barricade near Kabrono on Monday whilst he was returning from a visit to his pastor at the Wenchi Methodist. The Bono Regional Executive Secretary of the National Peace Council, Swala Abdallah Kwanda, says they are meeting the leadership of both the NDC and the MPP with expectations of facilitating peace among the factions. Precious Semevo joins me on the line with details. Hi, Precious. Precious, can you hear me? Okay, looks like Precious is unable to hear me. Precious, I'm hoping that you can right now. If you do hear me, tell us if that meeting has happened, the meeting between the National Peace Council and the feuding factions, the NPP and the NDC in the region. Can you tell us whether it has happened and how did it go? Okay, looks like Precious can't hear me. Let's try and raise him back on so we can get to speak to him. But essentially the story is yesterday there were some clashes between the NPP and the NDC in the Banda constituency in the Bono region, and one person died. This gentleman who died, we're told, is not a politically aligned person. According to his family, he had just visited his pastor and was returning home, but got mixed up in the crossfire when the NPP and the NDC engaged each other in some brief moment of violence at the registration center in the area. That gentleman who you see on your screen right now has died. He's a fresh graduate from Teacher Training College and 28 years old. We spoke to his brother yesterday, who narrated to us what the police says, what the doctor says. According to him, the doctor says his blood flow was interrupted with the stab, which was in the back, according to eyewitnesses. We're also been told that by the police that no one has been arrested as of yesterday. Today, the Peace Council is in the region. We'll be getting more when our correspondent, Precious Semevo, joins me with those details. Let's talk about coronavirus. Health authorities have secured a facility for setting up of the biggest COVID-19 treatment center so far in the Ashanti region. The 115-bed capacity facility at Twase in Echuma, Ngobieja municipality, comes with an intensive care unit and staff accommodation. My colleague Ohemin Teria of our health desk has more in this report.
Ashanti region has become an epicenter of COVID-19, with confirmed cases jumping from 543 in May to 5,259 currently. The region has recorded 58 COVID-19 deaths, the highest in any region. The situation has compelled health authorities to convert some hospitals under construction into temporary treatment centers. Centers at Komfanoche and Kumasi South hospitals are overstretched. Authorities anticipate the region could see an upsurge in cases, hence the need to secure the new treatment centers. Health Minister Kwaku Ajimemenu says the Frimpong Boating Medical Center comes in handy as the latest addition.
One of us who has turned himself to be a philanthropist, sort of, has donated his own personal clinic for use. We have done some work in here, and the director in Ashanti region, who is championing this, and the Ghana Health Service Director General, together with the Komfanoche Chief Executive, joined me to come and see Professor Frimpong Boating's clinic that he has donated to us. We have wards that can take total about 90 beds. We have an ICU that can take a number of patients, close to 15, and we can even create more. We have some little staff accommodation for the doctors who come and work here. We have identified doctors, staff have been trained, so this place is going to come on board to add on to what we have in Ashanti region as quickly as possible. There are regions very close to Ashanti region. Oti, Ahafo, Bono East. These are areas where Western North, we can bring patients from to this place. And I believe we will not get that upsurge. But Accra and Ashanti have become areas, epicenters in the country, and therefore we have to prepare adequately for any eventuality.
The new center will be run by Komfanochi Teaching Hospital. Chief Executive Dr. Ohineba Owusu-Danso describes it as a welcome relief.
Komfanochi have been forced to actually expand our treatment center. As I speak, the entire expanded holding area and then the treatment area expanded are all full. It's the reason why we have advised government through the regional minister, through the health ministry, for us to identify some facility outside Komfanochi, which is well isolated, so that we can assist with the kind of skill and personnel we have to also manage those centers and take care of those who are moderately ill. But going forward, we think that those who are critically ill, once we do this kind of arrangement, it will open up space for us to look at those who are critically ill and those who are severely ill, until such a time that we are compelled to also scale up the care for the critically ill outside Komfanochi. But we are hopeful that given what we are beginning to see now, if we continue to adhere to the protocols, we should begin to see our numbers to decline.
From Kumasi, for Joy News, Oimiteria reporting.
Now, we're still staying in the Ashanti region, specifically Kumasi, but one more health worker has died of COVID-19 in that region. Management of the Komfanochi Teaching Hospital revealed the health worker, who is a male radiographer, died early this month. Chief Executive of the Komfanochi Teaching Hospital, Dr. Ohineba Owusu-Danso, reveals that 170 other staff have tested positive. He, however, indicates 70% of them have since recovered and are back to work. Ohiminteria has more in his report.
The death of the radiographer adds to the public healthcare worker and high-profile casualties after the demise of the medical director at the Kwadaso SDA Hospital. One staff of CAT is reported currently to be on admission, with majority of them being managed from home. Dr. Ohineba Owusu-Danso will not give details of the deceased, but says he's happy about the recovery rate of patients.
As at the last check, Komfanochi, we have had about 140 people who have tested positive. I think the cumulative figure as at this week came to about 170. But in all this, about 70% of them have all come back to work. They have fully recovered and come back to work. And in fact, the recovery rate is actually very fast, given the fact that as I speak, we have lost, sadly, one of our staff. But beyond that, currently, we have only one staff who is admitted. For all these numbers, most of them have actually been taken care of from home and from their own self-isolation or self-quarantine.
230 health workers have, as of July 10, 2020, tested positive for COVID-19 in the Ashanti region. Komfanochi Hospital accounts for over 2/3 of the number, many of them being nurses and doctors. Meanwhile, Dr. Ohineba Owusu-Danso wants staff of the hospital to be more cautious of their safety in the face of rising scarcity of PPEs. As a first step, he urges them to use certified locally manufactured face masks and other protective equipments. The admonition comes as the multimedia group launches the Save the Health Worker initiative to highlight the plight of caregivers.
It's a challenge to the extent of usage. It's a challenge to the extent of even the pricing. Currently, that's our challenge, because even when you are finding some of the PPE, you don't get them. It's the reason why I think that the admonition is for all health staff to also begin to use the locally produced ones, which have actually been tested by the Food and Drug Authority to be as really credible as it is from those which have been imported. In fact, some of our locally produced cloth masks have been shown by FDA and other authorities like the Ghana Standard Authority to be even more effective than some of the imported nose masks. And I think the key thing is for us to take the responsibility into our individual selves and protect ourselves. Our destinies, our good health is currently in our hands.
From Kumasi, for Joy News, Ohiminteria reporting.
Ohiminteria is joining me via Zoom so we can have more of the details and the latest on this story. Hi, Ohimi.
Hi, Gifty.
It's good to see you. So help us understand this. One medical professional died, that was today. But put together, how many, do we have any figures, any concrete figures from the hospital as to how many health workers have actually died?
From the Confanoche Teaching Hospital, this is the very first time the medical staff has died of COVID-19. Though we do know in the Ashanti region that the first medical staff to die was the medical director at the Kwadaso SDA Hospital. Though, according to the Ghana Health Service, 230 health personnel have contracted COVID-19 or have tested positive for COVID-19, but 2, I must say, have died. One at the Kwadaso SDA Hospital, which is a child facility, and then the first 2 have also succumbed to COVID-19 at the public health facility remains the one we are talking about at Confanoche Teaching Hospital.
How is this affecting the morale of his colleagues or the other health workers who operate at this facility, which is key in healthcare delivery in the area?
It is natural for human beings to react to a death of a colleague or a loved one in this manner. The disease, we are told, according to our sources, is the head of the physiotherapy unit at Confanoche. He's age 55, and he's been working with the facility for some time now. So he has acquainted himself and endeared himself to the heart of many, especially those who operate within the precinct of Confanoche, and even patients who access healthcare at the facility. But one thing that remains clear is the fact that many are not aware. The news is yet to hit many people. Even when we spoke to the Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Ohineba Oguzudans, who confirmed the story, he was not even prepared to give more details because I learned there were a lot of work to be done by the hospital authorities to, for instance, reach out to the wife, the children, and the family of the lead allied health professional. So I must say, yes, the hospital staff, those who are known, have come into know of this story, are saddened by his demise. But it's natural. There's nothing that they can do to bring him back. All that they can do is to focus on what they are doing, and as the Chief Executive said, also think about how to protect themselves against coronavirus.
In your report, to give a background of how the Ashanti region is one of the areas or the regions that have been described as epicenters. I mean, you break it down. What is the general attitude of people right now, seeing that there are more people dying and there are more people getting infected? Are people slugging and still saying that we still need more evidence, or are people getting a bit more careful now?
From the previous records that we have, if we look at the figures for Ashanti region in May, as at May 10th, the cases were just around 543. But fast forward in the last 2 months, I must say the figures, if you compare these figures, then you will say that the figures have skyrocketed, because we are talking about 5,259 figures now. In those period, the Obuasi municipality and Obuasi East districts used to be the epicenters for the region. But now the attention has shifted from Obuasi to Kumasi Metro, where about, as we speak now, 1,348 cases have been recorded, followed by Oforokrom. And now the Obuasi municipality that used to be first is third on the toll. So if you look at these figures, even health authorities have described the figures that have been recorded in Ashanti region, especially Kumasi Metro and Oforokrom, as something that shouldn't have happened. The regional head director, Dr. Emmanuel Tinkran, attributes all these rise to the fact that more people are not adhering to the social distancing protocols, the preventive measures as announced by government. For instance, the wearing of face masks have been thrown to the dogs, and there are places when you go For instance, there's a particular spot that the regional health director mentioned, the Kumasi Roman Hill area. When you go there, people have flouted all these protocols as if nothing is happening at all. And he also blamed this on the fact that the laws that prescribe sanction for people who flout these protocols are too exorbitant. For instance, payment of a fine of between 12,000 and 60,000 for flouting the mandatory wearing of face masks is also making the police ineffective to enforce this law. So it's a whole lot of factors brought together in this particular issue. People have disregarded the social distancing protocols, wearing of face masks, and even the periodical buckets that used to be very common in these places have all, we can't see them on the streets for people to be washing their hands. So for health authorities, they are concerned that this is happening. And that is why they even called for a stakeholder consultation meeting to also dialogue on this and show how best all the stakeholders, the police, the Christian community, the Muslim community, and then the NGOs and other relevant organizations can come together to support the Ghana Health Service. So it's been a very tough battle for health authorities, and not only the health authorities, but the police, who are supposed to enforce the executive instrument prohibiting the not wearing of face mask in public.
Interesting, Ohiming, and it's good that you mentioned that organizations and groups are coming together to support in this. Hopefully we'll make something out of that. And you also mentioned rightly in your story the projects we're embarking on here at Multimedia. How is it catching up finally in the Ashanti region?
Yes, people are becoming more concerned that health professionals, they themselves are testing positive for COVID-19. In an instance where they go to work, but there are no PPEs, as Dr. Ohiniba also mentioned, to be put on to attend to their patients. So they believe that, yes, the campaign has come at the right time, and it is time for the public to also show some form of support to healthcare givers, especially in the area of providing them with PPEs, because their life matter. They need to save their lives before they will be able to save others.
I mean, thank you so much, and my regards to all the team members I see in the background there, Saeed and co. Thank you. Ohimi Teria is our correspondent in the Ashanti region on our health desk as well, speaking to us from our office there in the region. A clinical pharmacist at the Greater Accra Regional Hospital has reviewed some of her colleagues for fear of contracting COVID-19 withdrew their services over the lack of personal protective equipment. According to Mami Rabna Ansa, health workers there felt unsafe and had to abandon some wards at the hospital. In today's episode of Multimedia's Save the Health Worker campaign, JoyNews' Henry Kwesibedu spoke to the pharmacist who blamed the situation on lack of PPEs.
As a clinical pharmacist, we work hand in hand with the doctors on the various wards. So virtually have some of my colleagues at the emergency and the various medical wards. And we realized that during the COVID-19 times, there were times when people come into the ward, you are not too sure their status, and by the time you realize the person has turned positive. So we realized that if we are not, at that time, we were not getting enough of the PPEs. So it was a bit scary knowing that you are exposed to patients and you are not really protected. So that was our main challenge. So in the beginnings, we had to slow down on some of our services because we had to make sure we are properly protected before we can go back working on the wards and all that. So that has been our main challenge with our work. Yes. I think currently we are still struggling a bit. For my colleagues who are at the main COVID center, that one it's a bit easier for them to get it. But for those on the general wards, there's still been a challenge on getting the PPEs you need to actually work on the various wards. So it's still not readily available for all the pharmacists. Yes, yes. Oh, there was a time because some of my colleagues would come and complain to me that I go here, everybody, the doctor is in the gown, and I'm the only one in my normal lab coat going. Eventually it's quite scary. Yeah, so we had to more, like I said, as I said, withdraw a bit and see what we can do at a distance, because if I get very close and I get infected, I'm going to infect every other person in the pharmacy. So we had to readjust when it comes to some of our services. But as I said, with this donation, it's going to help us to go back confidently yes, confidently back to do most of the work we are doing. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much.
Hashtag Save the Health Worker, Henry Kwesi Bedu's conversation with that pharmacist there. Well, it is emerging that COVID-19 patients currently at one of Ghana's facilities in Accra are increasingly showing diarrhea and other stomach-related conditions. That's according to Commanding Officer of the ELWAC Level 2 Isolation and Treatment Center, Colonel Thomas Akwenas Bire. He says he made the revelation amidst a strong warning for people to take the pandemic seriously. Colonel Bire was speaking to JoyNews on the sidelines of a presentation by the United States Embassy here in Ghana.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19 in Ghana, there have been some who still do not believe the disease is real, despite the country recording over 100 deaths. Such persons often come up with their inability to see the lives lost to the disease as claims for their doubt. But speaking on the sidelines of a presentation of critical medical supplies by the U.S. government to the ELWAC COVID Center, Commanding Officer of the facility called on such skeptics to erase that erroneous perception and accept the reality.
Well, some people want to see the dead people feely before they believe, but they should not wait till we get there. So we should not take it for granted. It is real and people are dying of it. If you haven't seen a person die or somebody close to you hasn't died of it, you count yourself lucky and pray that you don't get there. We have seen it. We've seen them coming with all sorts of presentations. The other thing is that it's not that typical cough, sore throat. We are seeing more people with gastrointestinal signs and symptoms, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and all that.
According to Colonel Bire, since the establishment of the center, he has recorded 2 deaths.
Unfortunately, we had some deaths recently. We had 2 deaths in the center recently. But the secret lies in monitoring, constant monitoring. And so even with the ICU, for instance, where you need to be there constantly, but which is not practical in this situation. We have CCTV cameras that view the patients and the various monitoring devices. And so we go in as frequently as possible and we have somebody monitoring the CCTV cameras. And so when there's a need to intervene, we quickly do that.
Just like other health centers, issues of PPEs has been a major challenge, so this gesture by the U.S., according to the commanding officer at the center, is very timely.
In IT terms, they gave us the hardware, they've come to give us the software, which we need to do the day-to-day work. And so it's a very great presentation and support that has been given to us. And looking at the items, that are exactly the items that we need in terms of the medications that we use for COVID patients, vitamin C, zinc, hydroxychloroquine.
Meanwhile, Major Michael W. Kamara, Chief at the Office of Security Cooperation, U.S. Embassy, says the donation by the U.S. government forms part of emergency response efforts by the U.S. to the Ghana Armed Forces.
Our donation today to the Ghana Armed Forces here at ELWAC Stadium is really a continuation of our support that we've provided to the Ghana Armed Forces with our donation of these state-of-the-art Level 2 hospitals that we donated earlier this year. The hospitals were originally donated for the Ghana Armed Forces to use during their peacekeeping deployments, and it was a way that the United States could support the wonderful work that the Ghana Armed Forces does abroad in all of their support to peacekeeping. And so their ability to use these hospitals to fight the COVID-19 pandemic is truly a testament to the professionalism of the Ghana Armed Forces, and it really shows the advanced relationship that we have between the U.S. military and the Ghana Armed Forces.
Items donated include 10 glucometers, 1,000 liters of disinfectants, 2,000 N95 masks, 700 disposable gowns, 10 infrared thermometers, 2,000 tablets of zinc and vitamin C, among other items. Beryl and Estina Richsters report for Joy News.
So, it is a pandemic, but it's holiday time in Germany. And unlike here in Ghana, where we've partially opened up our schools, German schools are closed because they are on holidays. But then as the summer season kicks in, German Health Minister Jens Spahn has warned against negligence in dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, which could lead to a dreaded second wave of infection. Emmanuel Chase is correspondent with our partners DW. She is in Germany, from where she's connecting. Emmanuel, happy holidays to you ahead. But then governments fear that a second wave of the pandemic could occur. How does the government explain that? Why do they say so?
Well, there is a fear that the usual hotspots for Germans will become new clusters of infection. Flights within the European Union have resumed and they've picked up again. But we've seen large gatherings in places well loved by the Germans, such as Mallorca in the Balearic Islands, which prompted Health Minister Jens Spahn to warn people to remain vigilant. And as he said, where there are parties, and that's the case in Mallorca, the infection risk is particularly high. Now, all those places of holidays could potentially be new clusters if social distancing is not respected. Even if stricter face mask wearing rules have been implemented on some of these holiday hotspots, such as Mallorca, where it is now compulsory to wear a mask in closed spaces, but not everyone is happy about having to wear a mask in those spaces, and there's also a fear that potential infections could be brought back to Germany and would start a new cluster there.
And that would be very worrying, given that Germany had to, move from the lockdown, to easing of the restriction, and then had to reimpose the lockdown in some parts of the country. But people may not really travel a lot abroad. How then are Germans, for example, spending their holidays this year?
Well, the German Travel Association confirmed indeed that bookings were dropping for abroad, for favorite destinations such as Spain, Italy, Greece, the Canary Islands, the Balearic Islands I was mentioning before. Those bookings only represent a quarter of what they had been the previous year, yet they are picking up again. But there's a fear of the virus that plays a role in people's decision making when it comes to their holidays, and also there's the uncertainty and there's a lack of means, a lack of money. The fact that many people have been out of a job here as a result of the pandemic means that there's less money to spend on holidays, and we've seen a real shift of habits within the population. There's a trend showing that people prefer a vacation within Germany. There's been an increase of 62% in camping vans rentals, for example, and people also tend to prefer renting a holiday apartment instead of a hotel, for example. They want to be more autonomous, they want to be more isolated so as to avoid contact with other people, and as such so as to decrease the risk of infection.
I'm interested to find out what Ghanaians here think as well. I mean, vacation is not such a big thing as it is perhaps in Germany. But one of the things I thought to do this year was to, get to the German area, if I could. But that's not going to be possible. Will tourists from abroad, I beg your pardon, be coming to Germany this summer?
There will be less international tourism, of course, even though the European Union as a whole has relaxed its entry restrictions. So Germany has applied that too. That means that people coming from countries with a low infection rate, as established by the Robert Koch Institute, which deals with the pandemic here in Germany, those people may enter the European Union. Again, that includes countries such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada. It doesn't include Ghana. For countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea, for example, interestingly, the entry restrictions will only be lifted if the lift is reciprocated, and that's not the case yet. Now, the question of whether travel to Germany is permitted depends on where the person traveling has previously been staying and not on their nationality.
Oh, interesting. How are you spending your holidays, by the way, Minganoa?
stayed in Germany, safe at home.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. We'll see how it all goes. Certainly not the same times as we know it. Emmanuel, thank you. Emmanuel Chase is political correspondent with our partners DW. She's joining me all the way from Germany, and we've been talking about what holidays or vacation moment will look like in a pandemic in Germany, where, of course, holidaying or vacationing is a big deal. This is still The Pulse with me, Gifty, and up here. And we're back from, I almost said Parliament, but that's where we're about going. We're back from Germany, moving to Parliament, where the minority there is demanding a withdrawal of the Communication Minister's directive to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation to close down 3 of its digital channels to create space on the digital terrestrial platform, which is currently 4. Minority MP on the Communications Committee, Sam George, says Esla Owusu, the Communications Minister, erred in writing to GBC since it is not under her control, but rather that of the Information Minister. The minister, in a letter purportedly written on 26th of June, gave the GBC 60 days to act on the directive. Joseph Opoku Gakpo is our man in Parliament. He's back. Joseph, let's begin with the letter and what exactly it says. It's good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you, Gifty. I've really missed you, and I'm glad to be back on your show. It's actually a 1-page letter that the Communications Minister, Esla Owusu, wrote to the Director General of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Let me run through it briefly. It says that this is with reference to the virtual meeting that the 2 sides had held the day before the letter was written, specifically on the 25th of June 2020, between officials at the Communications Ministry and officials of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation. Now, we gather that the further communication says that further to the notice above in the mentioned discussions, the ministry hereby notifies you of its intention to reduce the number of channels your outfit currently occupies on the National Digital Terrestrial Television Network from 6 to 3 channels. This is to ensure that there is redundancy on the national DDT platform, which is currently at full capacity. And it goes on to say you will therefore be required to consolidate your programming in line with the directive. And the final paragraph says, kindly note that upon the planned future expansion of the network, which has been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the uncertainties generated in the global supply chains, you will be allocated additional channels. And it says, please take steps to implement this directive within 60 days of receipt of this letter. And so the explanation generally is that when it comes to the DDT platform, it's owned by the Ministry of Communication, and the decision that they've taken is that because there are up to 40 spaces on it, which are currently occupied, they would want to be able to have additional spaces in case government wants to do anything with it, including maybe national broadcasts that may have to run through it, or any other set situation, or maybe broadcasting any event of any sort, which is how come they need the redundancy. And they say if even national security wants to make use of it, they would want to be able to have that ability to be able to make use of it, which is how come that decision was taken towards the GBC to consolidate their platforms into 3 instead of the current 6. We gather that it's not just GBC that is being asked to do this. We are told Crystal TV also has about 3 different spaces on that. They are being asked to give up 1 so that then they continue to hold on to 2. So government says they are not specifically targeting GBC alone, but it's because they have need for those digital terrestrial platforms.
I'm sure that this has drawn a lot of reactions. Let's begin with within Parliament, which is what we started the story with. The minority, the spokesperson for on the Communications Committee, Sam George, Member of Parliament for Ningo Prampram, has raised some concerns. Tell us what these concerns are.
So himself and ABF Husseini, who is the minority ranking member on the Committee on Communications and also the minority spokesperson, they've been addressing the media here in Parliament, and they're raising a number of issues. First of all, they think that the Communication Minister erred in communicating to the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation because GBC is actually not under their purview. But government has also been responding to those concerns. The explanation coming from government is that the Information Ministry does not necessarily own those platforms. That specific DDT platform, they say, is owned by the Communications Ministry. And so government in response cites a very interesting example that there are several of these platforms. The government one, which is the DDT, which has the 40 spaces, is there. Multi-TV, the site is also another such platform that exists. DSTV also has one of such platforms. Now, the example government cites is if multi-TV wants any organization that's hosting itself on the multi-TV platform to actually consolidate or cut down on the number of platforms that it has to be multi-TV right into the organization and not the Information Ministry. In that same way, because the Communication Ministry owns that particular platform, then they would actually have to communicate it as such. Again, Samuel George, the Nego Pram MP, has been raising concerns, claiming that they think that we are getting into a political season and that government may have need for these additional platforms to transmit maybe their own election results on election day so they can collate their figures better. Or even, according to Sam George, they're seeing a situation where it could even be politically motivated because he says that they know of Asase TV that's coming up, that's looking for space within the digital platform space to actually run. And so they would want answers as to whether really government would want to create this space for Asase. And again, Samuel George makes a point that there is a plan transitioning to a digital terrestrial space, which is actually going to provide an infinite amount of space for various TV platforms. So they're asking that, why isn't government focused on creating a situation where they'll do the migration so there is actually more than enough space for everyone to occupy, rather than approaching this, in some just words, the lazy way by just taking from one side and creating the redundancy. And so they're raising those concerns, and they say they would want to particularly hear from not just the Communications Minister, but the Information Minister on why he's allowing this to happen to the GBC.
We'll come back to Joseph, to you for more of those reactions, but Sam George has been speaking, like you said, they've been addressing that press conference. Let's hear from him now.
Communications have the authority, the legal mandate, to instruct the GBC to shut down 3 of its channels. The GBC is not an agency under the Ministry of Communications. The GBC is under the Ministry of Information. We would have loved to see a directive from the sector minister. This is akin to the Minister for Interior writing to the Chief of Army Staff, instructing him to release military men from the 5th Infantry Battalion, when the Minister for Interior has no mandate or control over the Ghana Armed Forces. That's the Minister of Defense's remit. If the Minister for Communication did have any need for channels, the right procedure would have been to request of her colleague minister, the Minister for Information, to respond or do what she wanted to do. So we want to understand if the Minister for Information was in the know, because we see in the letter that he was copied. It was not a joint letter written by both of them. The next question we want to ask is, what is the reason for government's need? We are told that the DTT is, if you read the minister's letter, she says that the DTT is at full capacity and government does need spectrum. Well, if government needs spectrum, the ministry should rather be focused on completing the digital switchover. Because when they complete the digital switchover, you're going to have a lot of white spaces, which is additional spectrum for governments to use. I mean, this is, for want of a better phrase, a lazy approach at trying to get spectrum, if really the need is spectrum. Because if the need is spectrum, everybody knows that when you do the digital switchover, you're going to get a lot of analog spaces that national security, whatever government considerations, in fact, it's going to have considerations for bandwidth in the country and speed of bandwidth. So the ministry should have rolled over or done the switchover in 2017. It's 3 years and over late, and the ministry is finding shortcuts to get spectrum. Again, we want to understand what the real need for spectrum is. Another question we want to ask the Ministry of Communications is this not another example of state capture?
So, Joseph, I'm coming back to you. That is the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram there, raising the questions that the minority say they have. But there's been a response. You touched a bit on that earlier. The Communications Minister herself has been speaking about this. A summary of what she says, and we can hear her too.
This is actually in the interest of the nation to ask GBC to consolidate its channels, and that it doesn't amount to any form of interference in their work, and that it's actually in the national interest that there are those additional platforms which will be left unoccupied in times of emergency and when government needs it. She's been addressing the media here in Parliament House.
The minister, the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram makes certain sweeping assertions which can only be from the figment of an overactive imagination. I have no application, or I don't know of any application by Asase Radio, which is pending before the NCA for allocation of channels on any platform. What I am aware of is that there is a huge backlog of applications spanning from 2017 when we took over. So this is not a new occurrence, but we're faced with a pandemic, which makes it difficult for us to even complete the switchover process because of the cost implications on broadcasters. So the discussions are, what do we do to free up excess capacity? Right now, if the state has need of broadcasting urgent communication to the public, it does not have any means of doing so. If national security has need of broadcasting urgent communication to the state, to the citizens, it has no means of doing so. It is critical for us at this juncture to be faced with a process in which the only platform for broadcasting to the populace, the capacity on it, is completely used up. And so it just makes sense, without reading any ulterior motives into it, to work to create additional capacity on it in the event that that capacity is needed. Now, every other station on this platform is being hosted on one channel. And there's a difference between the channels on the DTT platform and the spectrum being utilized to provide that service. That channel is 40. That it has 40 channel capacity on the DTT platform, which is full. Every other station apart from GBC and Crystal TV is broadcasting on one channel. Has that affected their ability to transmit their information or their knowledge to the world and the rest of the Ghanaian populace? No. They are quite capable and have been using the access that they have on the DTT channel to do their work without interference from anybody. And that cannot be the motive under which the ministry is operating. Is it possible for GBC to transmit its various program offerings more efficiently from 3 channels as against 6? We've had conversations with the Ministry of Information, who assures us that it is. On the 24th of June, we had a meeting with both Crystal TV and GBC, and the Minister for Information was supposed to be in that meeting. Unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond his control, he was unable to be in that meeting with us. And it was at that meeting that we informed the 2 channels that they are the only 2 stations, 2 broadcasters, which have multiple channels on the DTT platform. And their multiple channels are also being carried for free by the state. And we don't think that's an efficient use of scarce resources, and indicated to them that they should look at ways in which they can consolidate their programming and use half of the channels that they currently occupy to project their channels.
Esla Usokufo is the Communications Minister with an explanation there. I'll go back to Joseph to wrap up with him. Joseph, So let's talk about the, Joseph, can you hear me? Okay, Joseph went all frozen up on me. So I'm going to go back, or go on the telephone lines now. I'm joined by Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Brahima. Mr. Brahima, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. And I'm sure that you have heard about this news already. What do you make of it?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I think that what the minister or what the government is seeking to do through the minister is untenable, and I think that it is quite dangerous for our democracy. Now, there is a reason why in our Constitution, Article 167 clearly indicates that the responsibility or give the mandate of insulating the state-owned broadcasters or the state-owned media and give that privilege to the National Media Commission as the body that would make sure that the state-owned media are insulated from governmental control. And this is not my language, it is the language of the Constitution. And indeed, it also makes it clear that in the performance of its function, the NMC shall not be subject to the control and direction of any entity. Now we are talking about channels, not any other property of GBC. We are talking about operational channels of the GBC. We are not talking about channels that are redundant, as in they are there and they are not being used for broadcast. These are active channels. And for each of the channels that the GBC is currently broadcasting on, there is a dedicated service. If you take Obonu TV, it serves the Ghana community, the Dangwe community, and so on and so forth in Greater Accra. GBC Sports has been the single channel that GBC uses to bid for international rights for, international sports competitions and so on and so forth. That makes it possible for Ghanaian audience to be able to access such content. If you take GTV and GTV News, these are the channels that the station has been using to do all the public service broadcasts, including carrying live events from the presidency, from parliament, and so on and so forth. It is therefore very surprising that even in the minister's letter, she did not see the relevance of the National Media Commission in this endeavor. And so if you look at the people or organizations that are copied in the letter, the NMC is not mentioned in this letter. So it copied the Minister for Information, Director General NCA, the Managing Director ILC Consultants, and I'm told that's an entity that advises the ministry on the DTT process, and the Chief Executive of KNET. Now we are talking about, you are going to touch the operations of a state broadcaster that is under the National Media Commission. The governing board of the GBC is appointed by the NMC. They intend to appoint the Director General and so on and so forth. And the minister didn't even find the need to copy the NMC on this. That's number one. Number two is that the minister is talking about the DTT platform being full. And the question to ask is, who filled it? As at the time they were filling it, didn't she know, or didn't NCA know, that the multiplex was getting full? For example, on 23rd April 2020, that was when Wuntumi TV, for example, was authorized. As at the time they were authorizing that TV to be on the DTT platform, didn't they know that the multiplex was getting choked? And in any case, why would it be the state asset, the one that is serving the entire public, that must be touched? And the minister says if they need a channel to broadcast in a state of emergency. I mean, for God's sake, we are in this, when the president is addressing the nation on COVID, I believe that you can have access to it on dozens of radio stations, dozens of TV stations. And that is precisely what GBC, GTV exists to do. So what is this point about if we need a channel to broadcast in a state of emergency? What is then the purpose of GBC? So I think that the arguments are completely untenable. There might be reasons why they would want to do what they intend to do. But finally, I think this provides a very unique and great opportunity for the National Media Commission to assert its independence, and to assert its relevance within, the media ecosystem. Otherwise, I believe a time would come that the GBC will be directed as to what program to broadcast and what program not to broadcast, who to present what program, and so on and so forth. And I don't think that is how to build a democracy.
Interesting points you make there, Mr. Brima. But just a quick one. So she indicates that the GBC has 6 channels, and they're being asked to consolidate these channels into 3. Can GBC not broadcast its programs on these 3 channels effectively? Because there's also a question that people have raised about how many people are watching all these 6 channels anyway.
Well, I think that, again, that is not a question that is tenable. There's a reason why the BBC operates more than 10 channels. Is it the case that with all the resources that they have, they could not or they cannot consolidate their programs on 5 or 4 channels? As I did mention, I've seen a document in which GBC outlines what each of the channels, is used for. Is it the learning channel, the learning TV that must be collapsed at this stage when our kids are relying on that for e-learning? Is it Obonu TV that is serving a certain community that must be collapsed? Is it GTV that must be, scrapped? Is it GTV News that must be scrapped? Is it the GTV Sports that must be scrapped? So the question of how many people are watching this or that, I don't think it comes in. And those of us here in Accra, we can make that argument because we have choices. But if you go to Damango, or if you go to Bunkrugu, or you go to, Sehuyo or so, or Sehuyo Akontomra, the people there rely on the GBC services to be able to access television. And therefore, to say that how many people are watching these programs, perhaps we would be arguing from an elitist point of view because we can do pay TV and watch our Al Jazeera and BBC and CNN and so on and so forth, or multi-TV. But that is not what the people in the rural areas who can access television rely on. And I think that if there is any time that the relevance of GBC and its channels is critical, it is now. Right. When we need free channels, public service channels to educate people and so on and so forth. And for God's sake, look, these the DTT platform now currently is sited at 42 places. It has 42 sites. 38 of these are operating on GBC property. 38 out of the 42, DTT sites are on GBC facilities. How much is being paid to GBC for this? And then when you have to make a decision, you say that the owner of 38 of the sites is the one who must sacrifice his channel. I don't think that is fair. And I don't think that, as I said, this is how we want to manage the state-owned media in this country. And as I said, I think the NMC owes all Ghanaians a responsibility to make sure that the state broadcaster is truly and precisely insulated as the Constitution mandates them to do.
I was coming to that bit where I wanted to find out what options are there. Apart from the minority raising questions about this, what other options are there to, the GBC, for example, to the people of Ghana, if they feel that this is not a right move to make. But you mentioned that the NMC should assert its independence and that this is an opportunity for the NMC to do so. But let me bring you back to some of the issues that people raise. You can call it a conspiracy theory, and for that risk, I would take that people say that the NMC itself, members of the NMC, are appointed by the government anyway. So if you're talking about asserting independence, how realistic is that even?
Well, it is not true to say that members of the NMC are appointed by the government. The composition of the National Media Commission is clearly spelled out in the Constitution, and it talks about a representative from the Bar Association, publishers and owners of private press. It talks about the Ghana Association of Writers, and Library Association, the Christian group, the Muslim group. It talks about the trade institutions of journalism, the Ghana Advertising Association, the Ghana National Association of Teachers, and then, of course, 2 representatives by the Ghana Journalists Association. And then the government has perhaps 2 people from Parliament, the majority side, and then 3 persons nominated by by the president. Of course, I'm very much aware that this is the very first time that we have a situation where one of the representatives of the president is the chairperson or the chairman of the commission. But in decision making, I don't think that the chairman's role is that of, something like the speaker, where he can overrule or permit a statement to be made and so on and so forth. The chairman has one vote. Of course, he may have a casting vote. But these, I believe, the people on the commission are respected people. The Constitution gives them a very important role, and we look up to them at this time to save us from this encroachment by government. Because as I said, if this is allowed, the next time we hear, it will be about government deciding for GBC what programs it must broadcast and what programs it shouldn't broadcast. So we look up to the National Media Commission to assert itself and ensure that the state broadcaster is truly insulated from governmental control.
That's the only option available, apparently.
Governmental control.
That's the only option available, isn't it?
Well, what is to be done, really, I don't think it is constitutional, because the government is seeking to control the GBC, because what it intends to do is to cut programming. Because, as I said, if you take out GTV Sports, you are cutting programming. If you take up GTV News, you are cutting programming. If you take up Obonu TV, you are cutting programming. So it's inherent, it is clearly something to do with the operations of the corporation.
Okay.
And that, how it is done, is the mandate of the National Media Commission and not a government. And this is not the first time we are having a government under the Fourth Republic. We had the Rawlings regime, the Kufuor regime, the Mills regime, Mahama regime, and this regime. This is the only time we are hearing that the government is saying we want to take out some broadcasting content, because that is what it means. If you take out GTV Sports, you are taking out a certain content from GBC. And I don't think that that should be allowed, because it invariably amounts to direct governmental control of the state broadcaster. And if that were to be allowed, very soon we will hear about government giving directives to Daily Graphic and Ghanaian Times on what to publish and what not to publish.
Right.
And I don't think that when we were coming into democracy, this is the kind of situation we wanted for our state-owned media. And again, just for us finally, we all know that the National Media Commission, for example, recently set up a committee to look into GBC and propose the necessary reforms for the corporation. Why would the government not? And it is something that the government is fully aware of. It is chaired by this eminent Ghanaian journalist, Madame Elizabeth Ohene. So why is it that at a time when GBC is supposed to be assessed and reforms proposed, that is the time the same government is saying that we are taking away some of your channels because the multiplex platform is full. When at the same time, just recently, they were awarding frequencies to persons perhaps close to government. I think this is dangerous. This is not acceptable, and it mustn't be allowed to happen.
Mr. Brima, I thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Suleiman Brima is the Executive Director of the Media Foundation for West Africa there. His position, this is not right and this is unconstitutional. He's looking towards the National Media Commission to do what he says, a session of their independence. This is certainly a story that's still developing. We'll keep our eyes on it, bring you more on that. This is still The Pulse with me, Gifty and Up here. Let's do a very quick break whilst I catch my breath. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Many thanks for staying with us. Now, help has finally come to octogenarian woman who had both fingers chopped off as a result of leprosy. Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who watched a Hotline documentary by award-winning journalist Seth Kwame Boateng, titled Withered Skins, was touched when Dari Pogo gave a chilling account of her life and how she struggles to survive. Dari Pogo lost all her 10 fingers to leprosy. She walks with only her big toes and only has her granddaughter supporting her. Every day she prays to God to send angels to come and help her. So that help finally arrived today when Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia reached out. But before we bring you details of that, let's watch excerpts of the documentary.
On a dirt compound is a thatched roofed mud house. Out of it, a frail-looking old woman emerges and walks towards a mango tree to get fresh air. Her name is Dari Puga, a woman possibly in her 80s, living alone in this part of the village with her 13-year-old granddaughter. Dari Puga suffered leprosy at a younger age, but at that time, she did not know what it was. She used local concoctions in the hope that she would recover, but over time, her condition worsened. She has lost all her 10 fingers, and from afar, you might think both hands have been amputated from the wrist. She remembers exactly how one after the other, she lost all her fingers.
She is. Local medication, a black concoction she used to smear on the skin. Okay. Yeah, he used to smear on the body.
And did she know it was a medical condition or?
Say initially they sent her to war when the condition set in, and that time Upper West wasn't developed as it stands today, and she went there and they said there wasn't medicating us at that time, and she came back. She said the experience is that it will swell from the digits, and it will start chopping off from the digits, from digit to a digits, call them phalanges. One phalanges to the next phalanges to the next phalanges till it reached the palm. That was how they start falling, and that was the beginning where he cannot feed herself.
Leprosy affects the tissues, especially the cartilage, and then more importantly affects the nerves. Now when the nerves are affected, it means that there is loss of sensation. Okay? It's not loss of mobility, although there is to some degree, but largely loss of sensation because it's the peripheral nerves or the nerves that are on the surface, if I put it that way, that are affected. Which means that you do not feel pain, you don't feel sensation. For that reason, you can injure yourself and not realize it. Okay? So they end up with sores and with ulcers that eat away at the flesh. The disease in itself also technically eats away at the flesh, the cartilage, and the bone. And so over the years, you get the digits or the extremities receding. And that's where you end up with this club-like features of the fingers or the toes.
And for this old woman, it appears the disease has also affected her eyes, so she tears up unknowingly. She manages to clean those tears with her disfigured hand. Dari Puga has lost 4 of her 10 children. The rest hardly visit. In fact, for over 5 years now, none has visited her. All she has now is her life and her granddaughter. She goes to bed without any idea where her next meal would come from, until good Samaritans pass by and offer them food. Dari Puga says at times they sleep on empty stomach.
Okay, what basically she's saying is that it's food. If she get money, she can buy food and cook and eat. She's happy. Apart from that, what again does she need? That's what she's telling us.
All she needs is daily meals.
Daily meals. That's what she said.
Today, what she had survived on until our arrival was this mashed local staple called tuzafi, made of corn flour. It wouldn't take a child less than a minute to consume it all. But because it's not enough, Daripoga sips it hourly so it can sustain her throughout the day. Anytime she's unwell and had to visit the local health facility, she treks for miles on her deformed legs, which have only her 2 big toes left.
She rather said before she can embark on the journey, she needs to set off as early as possible before the sunrise. She have to walk small. Sometimes before she get to the health center, the cleaners are still even cleaning around. So she will wait when they finish cleaning everything, just take care of her, serve her the medication.
And then she treks back.
So you can see where she lives. You might think it's an abandoned structure. No, it's not an abandoned structure. That's where she rests her head. And at times when there's nobody here, she has nothing to eat because there's nothing she can do for herself.
Seth Kwame Boateng's latest documentary. Following the airing of that documentary, a lot of you have been sending in your support through mobile money for her, and we're really grateful. Well, this morning, the Vice President reached out to her through the Upper West Regional Minister, Hafiz Bin Salih. They made some presentation at Gurungu, where Daripoga lives. Seth Kwame Boateng is joining me on Zoom to tell us more of what happened today. Hi, Seth. Tell us what exactly intervention the Vice President put in for her.
So this morning he dispatched the Upper West Region Minister to go to that village and see the woman. He made him go with food and other items, foodstuff and other items, and also gave her some money. I understand the items they presented together with the money amounts to about 5,000. I also understand from what the region minister tells me that from tomorrow, construction of a 2-bedroom building will start. In fact, the region minister went there with a contractor who will do the project, and the vice president has instructed that is done for her, and the vice president is actually sponsoring that. So that is the intervention we've received from the vice president. And aside him, we've had other Ghanaians also donate. Since yesterday, people have been sending the little they have to us. And the last time I checked, we've received a little over 3,000. And people are still sending some money to us to be sent to this woman.
God bless them and God bless her soul as well. Seth, congratulations for doing this work. Also, I was just going to ask you about what we have generated from the mobile money contributions, which you've rightly indicated. But she was obviously not the only one in that story. Wrap up for me on who else is represented in that story.
So Gifty, this is just the part 1 of the 3-part series. We have heard just the part 1. We have 2 more episodes to air. Okay. And there are other stories in the other episodes to come. So we may have to wait and hear the other stories too, Gifty.
No problem. Seth, thank you very much. We look forward to the next 2 parts. Seth Kwame Boateng is producer of that documentary, Daripoga, who has received some intervention, getting close to 10,000. Hopefully we'll get there. And to all the others who will be featured, we'll get some help for them. A judicial committee of the National House of Chiefs has today adjourned indefinitely an appeal hearing of the Bunkrugu chieftaincy dispute between the Jamong and Jafok family in the Northeast region. The judicial committee ordered lawyers of the feuding parties to file their written submissions within 28 days for hearing notice to be served. The appellants, that's the Jafok family, the contested chief and the Nairi, were also asked to file theirs within 14 days from today, with the correspondent expected to follow suit. Other respondents, I beg your pardon, expected to follow suit. From Nalerugu, our Northeast Regional Correspondent, Ilyasu Tanku, followed the proceedings. He joins me with more. Hello, Ilyasu.
Hi, Gifty.
Eliasu, bring us up to speed. Give us a background to this particular story briefly. Then we can move on to what happened today and what it means going forward.
Well, this case has been at the Northern Regional House of Chiefs for close to 1.5 decades. The House last year in August ruled in favor of the Jamon family, essentially declaring the now contested chief Abuba Nasimon enslavement as null and void. The House subsequently directed the Na Abuba Nasimon to return the traditional regalia to the enskinning authority, that is the Nairi, to enskin a new chief, essentially from the Jamon family. The chief, the now contested chief, rejected that particular ruling. The Nairi, which is the enskinning authority, also rejected the ruling, and subsequently Na Abuba Nasimon filed this particular petition at the National House of Chiefs, contesting that ruling by the Northern Regional House of Chiefs, essentially asking the National House of Chiefs to also declare that particular ruling null and void. And the Nairi is part of this particular appeal. The Nairi is also the second respondent. And so just almost a year now since that particular appeal has been filed, the House of Chiefs has started hearing today for the first time, and both the lawyers of the council, the feuding families, in fact, the female feuding family themselves were at the National House of Chiefs in Kumasi.
Eliasu, so essentially what happened today was for the National House of Chiefs to settle that dispute over all the appeals that have come, and they have suspended this indefinitely. What exactly does that mean?
Exactly. So what we gathered today is that one of the witness in this particular case, coming from the Jamon family, had been a disease, and so the lawyer was asked to, replace this particular disease. And so in the morning, when proceedings started, this is the lawyer for the Jamon family was asked to enter an application. In fact, he entered an application requesting to replace this particular disease. That application was granted. And then the House, the Judicial Committee of the National House of Chiefs, subsequently directed these two feuding parties to enter their written submission. Okay. Like you said, in the appellants are supposed, in this case, that is the Jaffok family and the Nairi, they are supposed to file their written submission within 14 days.
And 28 days. We've run out of time, so quickly tell us, how did they respond or react to this ruling? And let's wrap it up there.
Well, they are expecting that they will be able to, beat the time given to them. Okay. And so the hearing proper will start. Of course, we also been hearing that prior to this particular meeting, the Interior Ministry had to review the curfew in the Bunkurugu Township earlier from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., now from 8 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Okay.
We anticipate that there will be some jubilation from the Jaffok family when they get back to the Bunkurugu Township.
Eliasu, thank you very much. Eliasu Tanko is our Northeast Regional Correspondent. That is a long-standing feud, and the National House of Chiefs tried to sit on it, but it has had to be suspended indefinitely whilst the feuding factions have been asked to tender in some document. We'll keep our eyes on that. Log on to myjoyonline.com. There is more news there. And of course, you can scroll all the way through. We have our YouTube links there as well. You can follow our videos and our shows from there. My name is Gift. Okay, it's always a pleasure coming your way. Let's do this again tomorrow.